Hey everybody, it's the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and you are watching the weekly Wringer series here on clanofthegraywolf.com. Been a few weeks since I've seen you guys. A lot of things have happened for me. I know the changing of the seasons has officially taken place, which is nice. Enjoying having sun for longer, enjoying the fact that the weather is changing, and made sure to enjoy it by going to visiting various different parts of the world. Or at least the Northeast over the last few weeks. So you'll have to forgive me for that. That is why, I lost some of the capability that I had to do some mobile weekly ringers, which I think we can all agree were a little bit less quality. So I tried to avoid that this time and just decided, hey, I'll give people a couple weeks to kind of digest. That being said, there was a great question last time that was certainly, in fact, I will go ahead and say it. This has been one of the best weekly ringer questions I think I've ever asked. It might be the best. The conversation was awesome. I think there were a couple little touchy points which I'll get to in just a second, but lo and behold, sometimes, you know, even the blind squirrel gets a nut every once in a while, and sometimes the Commodore actually asks a good question on the weekly ringer. This one happened to be one of those, folks, and you guys responded in droves. So I want to get into that conversation. This is not going to be a short video for the faint of heart. There's a lot to talk about for the question for last week about, or not last week, but for last time, which was about whether or not there are better games, more better games now than there ever have been in the history of video gaming. So we're going to delve into that. I'm going to give you my opinion as I always do, and then I'm going to ask you guys a question for next week, which is going to focus on some of the mobile platforms, even though everyone right now is talking about all the new HD platforms that we're going to be hearing about over the next coming weeks. So should be a very exciting time. Good question for next week as well, so stay tuned for that. Now, before I get into the conversation, as I always do here on the Weekly Ringer, I like to welcome the people that have ponied up, put their comments where their thoughts were, and actually talk about and comment on the video and put their voice out there. Several of you mentioned that not only was it your first post, but several of you mentioned that you've been with the show for a very long time. Obviously, I want to make sure that I cover all the people out there that watch and don't comment. You guys are just as important to the show as anyone. As let me tell you, if I don't have people watching the show, then I'm just going to stop doing it, right? So you guys keep watching. That is what keeps me going. So thank you for all of you. Even if you don't comment, that's okay. We love having you guys out there as well. That being said, got a lot of new commenters to welcome to the party today, and I love a week that does that because I think it tells me that we're asking some good questions that people are interested in talking about. First of all, Rand Rocks. Simple, easy, not difficult to understand. Awesome name. Welcome to you, Rand Rocks. Jack of all games, 16. Is 16 a reference to 16-bit games? Is 16 a reference to age when someone first played a particular game? Who knows? But anyway, the Jack of all games, 16, welcome to you. I too consider myself, in many ways, a Jack of all games and a master at absolutely none of them, I should mention. And for any of you that took a gander at my own capabilities at NHL 94 during the Super Nintendo Marathon back in December, you can attest to the fact that I am not a master of at least hockey games, or at the very least sports games on console. Also, but anyway, welcome to you, Jack of all games. I also want to welcome Buddha Chief. Another very simple, straightforward. I don't really know what that means. I'm not going to delve into it. This is not a religious conversation, so I'm going to keep on moving. But welcome to you, Buddha Chief. Dr. Super Caligula. Man, a lot of stuff going on there. Not sure how to read it, but I know I love the comments. There might be, hint, hint, a few, I guess, choice words I have for some of the comments that were related by the doctor himself during the rest of the show. Same situation goes with Lol Death Hail. Lol Death Hail. Interesting. I like it. It's good, it's fun, it's quick, it's easy, but also might have a comment appear in the rest of the show. Just goes to show you, folks, you don't have to be a veteran commenter here to make the program for what I consider to be the best, or at least the most concise in terms of messaging comment of the week. It really gets to the heart of the argument. Now, as I also do here on the new and improved Weekly Wringer, is I like to go and talk about some of the undercurrent of ideas that were kind of there for all of the comments, or were said multiple times that I can't really attribute to a singular person or what have you, just to kind of talk about where the argument went this week. And I want to start out with this one thing, and that is, folks, that we are all friends here, okay? One of the reasons I love this, what has become the Weekly Wringer, certainly what I intended, and it has come to fulfillment, which is why I consider this show a success, even if we don't have thousands of subscribers and so on and so forth. The reason I consider the show a success is because we have an intelligent conversation, even a debate, on a lot of contemporary issues in geek culture, be it video games, be it technology, what have you. And I love that we have an intelligent conversation, and for the most part, we are troll-less. We don't have people here that are, just trying to get a rise out of people, and just being, aggravating for no other reason than just to be aggravating. We don't have that. We have a very good community. That being said, I want to make one important, it was requested of me. I agree with this perspective 100%. Some of the comments I think this week may have gotten a little out of hand. This is not a personal thing, guys. Don't take anything that we talk about here personally. It's not about you. It's not about, attacking what you think, and it shouldn't be about that. So if your comments are directed scathingly in direction of someone, and not their comment specifically, but toward them, I think that goes over the line, and I'd like to be able to avoid that. So respect everybody. I want to maintain that level of respect on the Weekly Wringer, and as long as we maintain that respect, no one's ever going to have a problem with me. So I think we might have crept over the line a little bit with a few of the comments this week, but and I don't want to harp on this too much, but I think we need to be sure that we're all very civil and we're all very friendly to each other, because after all, folks, this is a community. We started this site to engage and continue to engage with a community of people. That is where you come in. So if we don't have that friendly community, then we're really losing everything. So be careful. That's all I want to say about that. All right. A couple of things that we're going through the arguments for this week. The question really rotated around something that I know Male White Mage brought up. A couple people brought this up, and the idea is, what really constitutes a good game? What really is a good game or a bad game? Because, I mean, if you're going to define how many good games there are as a ratio of how many bad games there were, or the total number of games, you need to define probably both of those things, good and bad, right? I didn't do that on purpose. Besides, that never is the way my questions work. You guys know that, but I just wanted to bring it up. Totally valid point. Completely valid critique. If I was doing this question as a research paper, I'd have no leg to stand on right now, because I'd have to be able to answer to all of you about it. But, that's okay. That's part of the nature of the show. The other thing is, I think we have to define the terms of what a game is, and what, constitutes a good video game or a bad video game, or whatever. Is it review scores? Is it, which several of you mentioned, is it kind of the endearing quality of it? Is it the kind of critical reception of it beyond just scores? Is it the endearing legacy? I don't know. There are a lot of different ways to talk about the success of a video game, and I didn't do that on purpose. Here's another thing that kept getting brought up that I think is very important. Games as toys versus games as a pastime that's legitimate for adults to participate in. One thing I think many people missed out on during the course of the conversation was that video games, by and large, during the 80s specifically, and then into the early 90s, this only breaks kind of by the mid to late 90s, video games are by and large considered toys. They're sold in the toy department. They're sold by toy stores. The only way the NES became marketable in America, as all of you know, is because it was sold in the toy section of the toy store. If it was sold in electronics, they never would have sold it. Retailers wouldn't even carry it in the electronics department because they considered it to be for kids and only for kids. That is a framework within which video games have been trying to break free from for the last 20 years, and I think successfully have done so. However, there remain those kinds of biases toward video games, which really sits at the heart of many of the comments that some of you are making. Yes, there are video games that are made for kids and today, but all video games, really, almost all of them, almost every single one of them were made for kids 20 years ago. It's just that that's the way they had to sell them then. They don't have to sell them that way now. Now we have an ESRB. Thank you, Mortal Kombat, for kind of breaking the lines for us to kind of continue on this dialogue so you can have games for adults and it's okay. Therefore, that's there now. So I think, as we look at video games as a whole, there's so many more ways that they can exist. Not just toys, not just a pastime, entertainment, experiences of very, very different kinds, many of which you guys got into this week. Thirdly, or I guess lastly I should say, is what role does hardware play in all this? Several of you asked that question as well. I think it's a very legitimate point. If we're playing on a home console, or we're talking about, in other words, we're talking about comparing console games from this point to this point, or we're comparing PC games from this point to this point, or mobile games from this point, whatever, what have you, we're probably going to get different answers if we limit our answers there. I was really talking more about the totality of video gaming when I asked my question. I was also asking, really, as several of you jumped on, the concept of the question was more about the ratio of good games to the whole total, the whole sum total of video games today. Most of you picked up on that. Those of you that didn't, I apologize, but that's the way the questions go sometimes. That's really what I was trying to get at. I think there might have been some confusion there. I wanted to bring that up first. Okay. That being said, let's jump into the question from last week, which was really, as I say, about are there more better games today as a ratio of the whole totality of video gaming than there has been in the past? Here are the raw numbers from the vote as I have seen them. And by the way, this has been one of the most popular weekly ringers in terms of comments. I think there have only been one or two that have had more comments than this. That tells me we're asking good questions. The no's had 10 votes. Yeses had 12 votes. And the sames had 2 votes. That means that really very, very much dead even between people who say that no, games are not better now than they've ever been. There aren't more better games now than there have been. Then it's pretty much half and half between the no's and the yeses, with 2 people, kind of in the same, which I think is another great point. And rather than kind of dig into the economics of it, I'll just say that the yeses do win this particular vote. Not that that holds any bearing, and you're going to hear my opinion in a little bit anyway, regardless of what the vote happened to be. But just I thought I'd throw that out there. Let me get things started with Bearded Drew, who said that new games are mostly derivative. And I think if we're looking strictly at AAA titles, I think that there's a good argument to be made there. But even in that realm, I think it's difficult how we talk about it. The term cookie cutter came up later on. I liked how we got challenged to define cookie cutter, because for me, it means that everything is exactly the same. And I think what you will find is that is something that people try to avoid, developers try to avoid wholesale. Even when they're creating sequels, even when they're creating direct or even remakes of games, the thing that they're trying to avoid is the cookie cutter approach, and I think they do it remarkably successfully. However, that is not what Bearded Drew is talking about. It's talking more about derivative nature of video games. Now, I think you could argue that, as several people do during this week, that the derivative nature of games today is what makes them good. And then you'd have a lot of people, I think probably more people, that argue the derivative nature of games today is what makes them bad, or what makes them less, I guess, innovative, or what makes them less interesting than, say, the creative and wonderful games of the past. I'm amenable to this position. I think it's good. I like it. But I think it might be flawed. But rather than jump into that, I'm going to keep going through the comments and try to summarize when I get to the bottom. Carrara 2 talked about the renaissance of